This podcast is brought to you by Sales Fuel Hire, a platform to help companies hire smarter and flag 13 toxic employee types. Measure job fit, sales tendencies and motivators, decision-making abilities, and empathy levels, and make your next hire your best hire. Try it now on salesfuel.com/hire and use promo code MANAGESMARTER for $50 off your first purchase. Welcome to the Manage Smarter podcast with hosts C. Lee Smith and Audrey Strong. We're glad you're here for discussions on new ways to manage smarter, hire, develop and retain talent, improve results, and propel team performance to new heights. This is the Manage Smarter podcast.
You know, Lee, there's opportunity to be had amid all the chaos and stress going on right now, right? Mm-hmm. You've been wanting to kind of talk about that a little bit.
I certainly have. There is always opportunities for advancement, opportunities for growth, and even in the darkest of times. And we did that during 9/11, and we're going to do it again now.
We have an extraordinary guest today. Welcome to Manage Smarter, everyone. I'm Audrey Strong. I'm the Vice President of Communications here at Sales Fuel.
And I'm C. Lee Smith, the President and CEO of Sales Fuel.
And this man has quite a story, quite a life he's had. It's Cliff Farrah. He serves as the President and CEO of the Beacon Group. More than 25 years advising clients on organic and inorganic growth strategies and tactics in, the healthcare vertical, tech, industrial, energy, and defense marketplace. His thought-leading work on growth strategy, innovation, commercialization, market disruption, and service business model design has been used successfully by Fortune 100 clients. He's the author of dozens of growth strategy and analytical frameworks. He has a white paper that I just took a look at that is very interesting and germane to what we're going to talk about today, called Racing in Light Air. And because Cliff is a competitive sailor, a former high school sailing coach, and a U.S. national amateur champion, it's got a bunch of analogies in this white paper called Racing in the Light Air that are germane to what do you do to get ahead in this market climate, a down market. Cliff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Audrey, thanks. Nice to be here, and nice to chat with you as well, Lee.
Thank you.
So what are some of the lessons you say for, you've got lessons for doing business in a down economy. What are some of the top lessons?
Yeah, I think, when I wrote this framework, my intent was to try to do something that people could connect with. And not everybody's a sailor, but there are a lot of rules for sailing that, that are relevant in a down economy. That I think we can talk a little bit about. I don't know if you want to talk about the sailing part first or the business part, but when in light air sailing or when there's very little wind on the water, clearly finding the breeze is important. And all that means is, look, you keep your head out of the boat, you look to find breeze on the water, and you try to keep yourself in that breeze. From a business standpoint, in your market, someone is spending money. And the reality is that identifying who those people are, what their needs are, and then how you might uniquely or best address those needs it's just a critical behavior. And I think there can be a sense of being overwhelmed as you look at the market right now. People, I think, are either super busy, right? If you're in med device right now, if you're in anything to do with network comms and infrastructure build out, because people are working from home and there's all sorts of demand being put on networks, and we have a healthcare crisis that we're trying to meet. Those folks are insanely busy, and they're just trying to meet demand, and that will continue for a while. There are other sectors, you could pick oil and gas right now, which was in trouble before. Mm-hmm. This crisis emerged. In those markets, you could be feeling overwhelmed, and I think it's important to have faith and be smart about identifying where, in fact, needs exist and how you might serve them. Another rule in light air that we have is you shed weight on the boat. Heavy boats are slow boats. So you need to be smart about the right size of your organization for the workload that it currently has. We're Americans, so we tend to be extraordinarily optimistic about our ability to, as business owners, right? If you're an entrepreneur in America, you tend to be extraordinarily, glass is half full kind of a mindset. And I think it's important that as you consider, go forward, you're very realistic about the headcount that is required, and you're grappling with things like furlough and layoff. And we have a stimulus package right now that gives some relief to people on that front, employers, and I think that staff is. So I think those are a couple of really, really basic ones that are super hard to execute well, that people need to be thinking about. The other, there are some other ones that I think are interesting, that are sort of non-intuitive. In sailing, in racing boats in light air, there's a trade-off between how close you sail to the mark and how fast the boat goes. So it's pointing versus footing. I won't get into the principles there. Sailors will get it. But from a business standpoint, what it means is it's important you keep the motor running. So rather than strictly worrying about getting and maintaining your top line revenue perspective, it's much more important that you keep your people busy and that you keep your core team busy. So the trade-off is you might use a price discount to maintain work so that the engine continues to run and doesn't break. We think that's much more important than trying to maximize margin or maintain some arbitrary standard that you set before.
That makes sense.
Cliff, this discussion reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which is all ships are safe when they're in the harbor, but that's not what ships were built for.
Right. and that's totally true. And, we talk a little bit in this white paper about sometimes a flyer pays. And what that means is, sometimes you need to take a risk, and it should be a calculated one, but markets are in disruption. So every one of the listeners right now should be thinking about the near and long-term implications of the pandemic, right? So let's think about it. Let's take the fact that we're all starting to work from home. There are economic, infrastructure, political, cultural implications of this, and savvy companies are starting to think through what that means to their business. So,
do I really need this much commercial office space?
Yeah, commercial office space.
Right. So let's talk about that. So you're a property owner right now. Your tenants are asking you for abatement on their rent. Some of them are probably filing for bankruptcy, unfortunately. What do you do with that square footage? So property managers, owners of physical infrastructure should be thinking about repurposing their footprint, about changing their business model. So let's assume that we all get comfortable working at home. I've been working at home for a long time, so for me, this is very, very normal. For other people, they're going to have 6 months, 6 months of work from home experience by the time this is over. They will have built out enterprise grade communications infrastructure in their home. They'll get used to the 1 minute commute, right? The walk from
Past the cat down the hall. Yeah.
If we can all stay out of the kitchen, it would be great.
Yeah, right. So they start to get used to that, and there's going to be some percentage of worker that wants that to continue. So employers are going to be confronting whether or not that's something they want to embrace. If it is, then commercial real estate's a tough hold right now.
The way I see it, Cliff, is like the pandemic is a great accelerator. So things that were already happening before are now just accelerating. And whether it be shopping malls is one example. It's like now they were already getting hit, with some of the retailers filing for bankruptcy. Well, bricks and mortar retail, was another one that was already sliding. And, delivery from grocery stores was something that was already picking up, just like online learning and things like that. These were things that were already happening, but now they've been greatly accelerated. And so just as the shopping mall has to replace the Sears and Roebuck store I'm dating myself, the Sears store that
timely reference. Yes.
Yeah, that have gone out of business now with a urgent care center or with a gymnasium or something like that. Just as you said, it's like we have to use our space, we have to use our people and keep them busy and keep them productive.
Yeah, so I think that's spot on, and so being creative and taking a flyer. So think about urban office buildings where there may be a housing shortage. Repurposing, reconfiguring offices into residential space, or a portion of offices into residential space, is something I think we'll probably see. So do you get ahead of that? Is it something that you start to shape the market in your area so that you're positioned at the forefront of that shift and able to take advantage of it, are the kind of things I think we'll start to see.
One thing we've been really wanting somebody to come on the show to talk about this, an expert, is talking about taking on your competitors one by one, which you referenced in the white paper. So
Right.
you said, we're all still in our boats and we're still racing. And so I can see my 4 competitors ahead of me. You said you take one on at a time. So how do you know which one to go after first?
Yeah, great question. I'll tie it into another point as well, which is this answer. So the important thing is you have to reframe your mindset entirely as you think about competing in a bad economy. Everyone is struggling in your sector, right? Like, there's nothing unique. You're not being punished. It's not something that you did wrong. The truth is, when you have this sort of a downturn, with the amount of time that's associated with it, you have to reframe your expectations. You have to reframe what you think the new is, and part of that is a very honest assessment of yourself versus your competitors. I think the other piece that I don't really talk about in the white paper that I believe is a truth is any share gains you make in a down economy, as the market rebounds, you manage to maintain that share percentage, ultimately yields a multiple effect.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see an awful lot of movement in the market right now in terms of share. Sometimes that share happens because your competitor can't sail anymore, right? For whatever reason, they can't economically survive, and they close up shop. And part of the challenge in picking off that competitor is really picking up their customer base. How do you immediately step in and take advantage of that? The other thing that you have to do is sort of look at your performance at a much lower scale relative to their performance at a much lower scale, and that makes logical sense, but practically it's super hard to do. So for example, all the work you did last year, figuring out your go forward market, market size, trend analysis, all the classic stuff that you do when you're worrying about your annual activities or your multi-year activities, all of the data that you base that on, throw it out. It's no good anymore, right? You can't be making decisions based on work that you did in March, April, or May of last year. It's just not real anymore. So very, very quickly, you have to understand that new environment, where the competitors are in that environment, and then you need to have very mercenary thoughts about how you're going to pick them off. What's their weakness relative to yours? What can you focus on that they can't do? How can you use your capabilities to take share from them? And it depends on the company and the industry and the size of the entity and the resource you can put behind it. But I think that mindset is super important, versus dreams of global dominance. Right now, you should be thinking about day to day, getting through this transitional period, and then how you take more than your fair share in that time frame.
And you're right. You also then have to take stock of yourself and realize what you can do and what you're really good at. So I think that also dictates which competitor you go after, because if you sense a weakness in them, which is your strength, that in my mind, that's one that you go after immediately.
Right. Usually, more sailing analogies. Right, back in the days when sailboats fought one another on the water, you wouldn't see a little boat taking on a big boat typically. You'd see a little boat taking on a little boat. So that's one of the key factors, is try to take on like-sized creatures. And then if you have the ability to gain access to capital, either through outside investment or your own funding, you're going to find this is a phenomenal time to buy share. So acquiring companies that are having a tough time weathering the storm, especially smaller, newer entities that have good intellectual property or capability, I think you're going to find it's a buyer's market for quite a while.
It's a great time to go after their talent too.
Absolutely. So that's actually thinking about who you would like to get on your team from a competitor that's in a critical role can have a major impact on both businesses. But more importantly, I think I heard an estimate the other day that somewhere 28 to 30% unemployment is ultimately predicted. You're going to find a lot of folks who are in the market, either on furlough or having been laid off from top firms, top companies, who are out there eager to find a new home. So I think spending time to keeping an eye out and dealing with that human resource crisis that we face globally, and especially here in the U.S., right? Finding that talent, retaining that talent. This is a super good time to be focused on.
It's beacongroupconsulting.com, everyone. And I don't want to say that as my journalism career that we've buried the lead, but the reason that Cliff has created this business and has this lens oriented toward always forging forward, there's a very compelling story behind that. Do you want to share that?
Sure. Yeah, I've been a consultant my entire career, and I've had an opportunity to work in a number of great firms over time. But about several years into my career, I decided I wanted to eventually start my own firm, and I really wanted to focus on the growth side of things. In the services world, there's the profit equation, right? Profit equals revenue minus cost. Lots and lots of consulting on the cost side of things. Process improvement, IT consulting, HR consulting, anything you can measure formally. That's a great thing to consult in because you can demonstrate ROI. Mm-hmm. The revenue side's a little trickier because it's hard to show causality. And when I finished laying off, I think my somewhere in the 1800th person as part of a project, I decided I didn't want to make money on other people's misery. So I started thinking about growth. And when 9/11 happened, I was supposed to be on the second plane that went into the towers, and I canceled the night before to race sailboats, and which is why I'm such a freak about sailing, I think. But it triggered, it accelerated. To your point, it accelerated a decision I had made that I probably wouldn't have taken for a number of years, and I started the firm. And at that time, everyone thought I was pretty crazy because it was a down economy, very, very similar in terms of the travel environment, the economic downturn, the uncertainty in the market, the distress in the market. And I had a 1-year-old child and a pregnant wife and a really strict non-compete in place. So I had my work cut out for me. But what I did is I did a lot of what is laid out here in the framework. And you all, normally we don't share our frameworks outside the company, but in our clients. But we've been making more available so that companies, as they're trying to figure out what to do at this time, are equipped and have another way to think about the challenge they face. But we followed the money. We knew that the defense sector was an area where the American warfighter was going to need support to go fulfill the mission, and that's where we started initially. We weren't silly about hiring a whole bunch of people and having the perfect letterhead and all the sorts of things that new entrepreneurs do. We just focused on grinding out for a year survival, right? Doing relevant work, helping clients grow, being referenceable, all of the things that you do to build momentum. I think the lessons that we learned, the pragmatic mindset we had, the brutal self-assessment of our capabilities and where those fit in the market versus kind of high self-esteem were really, really necessary to let us navigate at that time. And now it's what, almost 20 years later. Last year we completed our 1,000th project for our clients. We work with leading corporations around the globe and help them figure out how to navigate times like this. So it's been a great ride so far.
Ironically, your story is one of by doing what you loved, it saved your life.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm grateful. I feel like it's we have a phenomenal team at the firm right now, and these are really difficult and uncertain times. And we're living this playbook, and it's hard, but we're doing it because this is what needs to be done to survive. And I think my intent is that it continues to work the way that it did before. So I'm not just advising this; I'm living it right now.
And you have lived it. Well, we feel very lucky that we had you as a guest today, Cliff, because it's great advice from somebody who's been through it before and now again. So thanks for all the great advice. Beacon Group Consulting, and on LinkedIn, you are Clifford Farrah. And I like this. Sadly, you said, I don't participate in Twitter, and my children are very disappointed in me. So no Twitter.
No Twitter. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, Cliff. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Audrey. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information at salesfuel.com.